Coming up on We Talk News this week, more rumblings out of the U.S. Senate about safe banking for cannabis. The chair of the banking committee says we need to pass safe banking this year. In the meantime, in Santa Cruz, California, thieves stole over $500,000 worth of the green gold. And don't put all those marketing dollars into Twitter just yet. That site continues to shut down some cannabis-related messages. And if 420 is a big holiday for you, you might want to come to Massachusetts to work for Temesco Wellness because you're going to get the day off. We'll have that story and more on our news from coast to coast on We Talk News next.
So for years, we've been doing manufacturing, financial services, medical, and so forth on businesses that stand alone, from doctors' offices to day traders to even small banks. And so when cannabis came along, all of the tools, skills, and miscellaneous that we learned in there, we were able to apply it for them. And for us, it wasn't that big of a problem or a challenge. It worked great. And so they just needed a reporting feature in one software, and luckily that the software company came through for us, came it back, and now it's become the backbone for our offerings, and it's worked out incredibly well.
We are Pro Cannabis Media.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to this week's edition of We Talk News. I'm Jimmy Young, the founder of Pro Cannabis Media, filling in for the vacationing Elena Pinto, who will be back next week. Our top story this week is a toss-up. Do we talk about a huge robbery of a cannabis grow house in California, or the hope about banking reform at the federal level? Shocking or hopeful? I always go with the hopeful thing. So we start in Washington, D.C., where the Senate Banking Committee chair says we need to pass safe banking this year. Now, if you're keeping score at home, yes, safe banking has passed the House 7 times in the last few years, but it's the Senate where that effort ends. Now, there just might be some hope. Safe banking is all about public safety, and since that industry is forced to be a cash retail market because of its federal classification as a Schedule I drug, but while cash is still king in the legal business, the asset is still the plant. In Santa Cruz, California, there were 2 robberies of grow facilities in that town near San Francisco within 2 days. Now, if you ever have visited a grow facility, you know there are fences, video surveillance, and usually around-the-clock security force on the site. It still didn't stop heavily masked men with weapons from invading the facility in the wee hours of the morning last week. It took just 15 minutes for those organized invasions to get away with over $500,000 worth of product, flower. All that weed is probably headed to the legacy market, which continues to be thriving in the early years of legalization. Some states are starting to go after the criminals who are targeting legal stores for cash robberies, and that's certainly true in Michigan, where their attorney general issued 12 warrants for the 20 robberies in that legal state. Here's the state's executive director for NORML, Rick Thompson, with more.
Hello again. This is the Michigan Report with Rick Thompson on Weed Talk News. Let's begin. Michigan's Attorney General has issued warrants for the arrests of a dozen people believed to be responsible for 20 or more break-ins at cannabis retail locations in May of 2022. She's charging the dozen with some combination of safe breaking, which is a life felony, criminal enterprise, a 20-year felony, and breaking and entering into a building with intent, which is a 10-year felony. The AG took this opportunity to push the United States Congress to enact cannabis law reforms like the Safe Banking Act. She said, quote, "Without access to traditional banking, the cannabis industry is left as a ripe target for criminals. Any legal businesses should have fair access to our banking institutions for the security of their own business and employees, as well as public safety." Michigan has experienced an unprecedented wave of robberies in cannabis retail shops during the last 12 months, and Congress has failed to pass banking reform for the cannabis industry for years. Well, last week I told you that cannabis retail prices in Michigan were rising and the number of cannabis plants being grown in the regulated market was lower. A recent article from Crane's Detroit Business Magazine examined the possible reasons for this. Enforcement action has scared some of the players who illegally supplement their inventory with unregulated cannabis. And the low cost of distillate oil means it's cheaper to buy it than to produce it in Michigan, resulting in fewer plants being grown. And the big guys are only growing what they need, which benefits the little guy, according to the experts cited in the article. The plant count today in the regulated market down more than 20% since September, per the article. And in a tough market, fewer plants directly translates into lower cost of operations. Well, you can add another name to the list of Michigan cannabis companies which have been placed in court-ordered receivership. Comco Wellness of Concord was revealed to be in receivership via a Facebook post by Mid-Michigan Cannabis Attorney's Principal James McGilly. The letter he posted was dated March 14 and indicates those to whom Comco owes money should get in line to recoup their losses. According to a 2022 press release from Comco itself, the vertically integrated company was named one of Michigan's top dispensaries by Leafly. That designation was based on review data, reorder rates, and other factors. Per their website, Comco Wellness is a fully integrated wellness company which grows, produces, packages, and fulfills cannabis and CBD products through in-house brands and private white label opportunities. Comco is represented in this action by legal firm Miller Johnson. And that's it for the Michigan Report with Rick Thompson on Weed Talk News.
The state of New York is trying to start the same initiative after over 1,100 illegal cannabis storefronts have opened in New York City, while the legal market just starts up. Pam Chmiel has our latest cannabis news from New York.
I'm Pam Chmiel, host of the Mary Jane Society podcast with the New York City Cannabis Report for Weed Talk News. Former New York City Mayor Mike Bloomberg speaks out on weed. He rarely weighs in on New York issues since leaving City Hall, but he is publicly blasting New York lawmakers. He claims the state took so long to get licensing operations up and running that it gave the illicit market a 2-year head start on everyone else. He said that voters should demand that New York's governor and lawmakers take responsibility and fix this mess. And he's essentially saying that elected officials are allowing illegal stores to sell marijuana to kids, and voters shouldn't forget it. And in other news, New York bans billboard advertising for cannabis companies. Advocates think it's unfair to prohibit weed companies from using the same marketing tactics that other regulated industry use, such as alcohol. And no surprise, a deadly blaze in a Bronx apartment fire is likely caused by cannabis grow lamps. Investigators have determined that the blaze was caused by electric heating lamp used to grow 6 marijuana plants. And the fire chief is reprimanding the Office of Cannabis Management, saying, "We have seen before how dangerous these high-powered devices can be, and without regulations or guidelines to protect the public, people are unnecessarily being placed at risk. Marijuana laws need to be fixed, and the community demands it." And lastly, New York Governor Kathy Hochul has thrown her support behind civil fines for up to $10,000 a day for unlicensed commercial cannabis activity in an attempt to crack down on the state's thriving illicit market. That's this week's New York City Cannabis Report. I'm Pam Chmiel from the Mary Jane Society podcast, reporting for Weed Talk News.
Next up, the Massachusetts Cannabis Report, sponsored by Holyoke Cannabis. Well, another week in Massachusetts, and yes, another new cannabis dispensary has opened in the town of Grafton. Discerned is the name, and Alan Villatoro is the CEO. They are located right on Route 122, and the definition of the word discerned is to perceive with the eyes, detect, or distinguish. Standing out from other licensed dispensaries is a real challenge for the over 300 stores now open in the Bay State. But Allen's location and dedication should distinguish this store and make it a dispensary destination.
I just wanted to, I guess, establish some presence in the market to demonstrate that I'm not going to be just another cannabis, another, pot store. We're a full service cannabis company brand, really. And professionalism and legitimacy are at the top of what I want to accomplish. And this is why, I don't dress up like this anymore unless, I have to meet with certain people that aren't familiar in that sense. And I do always try to promote the brand, but professionalism and legitimacy is where I come from in banking, and this industry, I feel like sometimes lacks it, and it gets thrown under the stigma. And that's not going to help us move this forward, And so my thought on it was, I drill it at the team, and they're like, no, they get it now, So it's legitimacy and professionalism is what I'm looking for.
One more note from the Bay State. Employees at the medical dispensary chain Temescal Wellness are going to get a day off on April 20th. That's right, one of the busiest days of the year, and this dispensary will be closed. That's so that their employees in the stores, their growing and manufacturing facilities, and in the corporate office will all be able to enjoy the annual cannabis holiday by not working. Bay State Cannabis Report is supported by Holyoke Cannabis, Holyoke's finest cannabis recreational experience. Now let's take a look at what is going on internationally in cannabis. And before we head over to Europe and Canada, let's talk about what is going on in South America, and specifically in Brazil. 10 days ago, the Superior Court of Justice in that country announced it would be ruling on the future of cannabis. Reuters reports that the court will rule on whether farmers can plant cannabis legally. A biotech company wants permission to grow cannabis and import seeds with higher levels of THC than is currently allowed. The legalization movement has kind of stalled in Brazil's legislature over the past few years, and this ruling could open the door to a whole new market. The European market is heating up, and that's where Lex Pelger lives and follows the cannabis legalization movement. Lex?
I'm Lex Pelger from White Whale Creations with this week's European Cannabis Report for Weed Talk News. In the newest report from the UN's International Narcotics Control Board, they address their concerns about states legalizing cannabis while the federal government keeps it illegal. The UN body says that according to the 1961 Single Convention on Narcotic Drugs, governments must carry out the provisions of this treaty within their own territories. While this seems to be a pointed poke at the United States, the practical impact remains unclear. Other UN members like Canada and Uruguay have legalized cannabis for adult use and faced no consequences. The Narcotics Control Board did state that simple decriminalization of cannabis without allowing for sales can be considered consistent with the convention, but full adult use legalization would not. In Germany, 2 updates. On the legalization side, after very good feedback from the EU, the country's health minister, Karl Lauterbach, said that a revised legalization proposal will be brought to the legislature in the next few weeks after it incorporates some of the changes suggested by the European Commission. There is also a legalization bill in the Bundestag right now, but it will probably be rejected in favor of waiting for the final details of the government's plan to emerge. In its current form, the proposed legislation from the health minister would allow adults 18 and older to buy and possess 20 to 30 grams of cannabis at federally licensed stores and possibly pharmacies. People would be allowed to grow up to 3 plants for personal use, with rules on enclosing them to prevent youth access. And upon implementation of the law, all ongoing criminal proceedings related to offenses made legal under reform would be suspended. On the medical side, the country just passed a new set of regulations designed to decrease bureaucracy for medical cannabis patients and increase access. They opened up cannabis prescriptions, allowing them to be made by all medical doctors and not just specialists. Only the initial prescription is required, and no reauthorization is necessary for subsequent changes to dosage or ingestion methods. And most importantly, health insurance companies can only refuse to cover medical cannabis prescriptions in exceptional cases. It appears that Europe's largest economy is rumbling forward in its acceptance of cannabis. Finally, in Afghanistan, the Taliban announced a decree banning the cultivation of hemp. Violators will be punished under Sharia law, and their plantations will be destroyed. But a recent UN report highlights Afghanistan as the second largest source of seized cannabis resin in the world, after Morocco. That's the European Cannabis Report for this week. For more on the science side, see my newsletter on Substack, Cannabinoids and the People. I'm Lex Pelger from White Whale Creations reporting for Weed Talk News.
In Kansas, the protests and attention over the past few weeks did not move the needle for reform. In fact, while there was a debate on a bill about starting a medicinal program in committee, that has now stalled and the issue has been tabled, perhaps ending any hope for reform for the rest of the year. Interestingly enough, the governor in that state, Laura Kelly, has been asking her legislature to work on getting a medicinal program going and approved. But now it's probably wait till next year. No such issue in neighboring Missouri. That's where Brandon Jones has our report from the Show Me State.
Hey everybody, it's Brandon Jones from Beagery Distribution with Missouri Cannabis Report for Weed Talk News. And as you can see, I'm here at Lucky Leaf today. There's a fun festival expo going on here in Kansas City to help support the cannabis industry and getting a lot of different people from the industry, all the way from devices to humidity packs. So come out to Kansas City at Sheridan at Crown Center if you can come out here and support the cannabis industry and come out and check out Lucky Leaf. But also, like we talked about, Missouri sales has gone crazy over here. The first month reached over 100 million in sales. As we noticed, a lot of people from out of state are also coming in to take part of the recreational aspect, and they don't have to have, that in their state, where 7 of the bordering states do not allow recreational marijuana in their state. So we're seeing a lot of people crossing the border. Just be safe when you're traveling back, I ask, or probably maybe people are actually consuming here in Missouri. Very excited to see all the events that are getting ready to happen and just see how this Missouri market is taking off with people like Lucky Leaf having a lot more expos and CannaFest and the 420 event all coming here to Missouri. So again, I'm Brandon Jones with Missouri Cannabis Report for Weed Talk News. Everybody have a great week.
In Mississippi, the medical program there is once again getting tweaked. The program has been operational for about a year now. The Board of Medical Licensure added some additional requirements that was not in the bill. Now, this would eliminate those. So that's certainly good news. No such issue, however, in Oregon, where there continues to be a glut of product. Marianne Cursetjee has more from that state and when Jim Belushi's next season of his show comes out.
I'm Marianne from Alibi with this week's Oregon Cannabis Report for Weed Talk News. A couple of weeks ago, we reported on the deaths of 2 Oregon cannabis entrepreneurs in Texas. This week, law enforcement officials have announced 2 suspects have been charged with murder. Officials are describing these murders as a weed deal gone wrong. Also, the state released the Oregon Economic and Revenue Forecast, which included some interesting points. One item is that cannabis tax delinquencies are increasing. Also, retail price per gram continues to decline and is at $4 a gram. And finally, Oregon's celebrity cannabis farmer Jim Belushi's show, Growing Belushi, will be airing season 3 starting on 4/20. You will be able to binge that. That'll do it for the Oregon Report this week. I'm Marianne with Alibi for Weed Talk News.
The race to be the 22nd adult use legal state to allow cannabis is still going on. One state that has made quite a bit of progress in the state's legislature is Pennsylvania. Not only that, but now the state is making it easier to obtain a medical card. Here's Scarlet Express's Maya Krysztofowicz with more from the Keystone State.
I'm Maya Krysztofowicz from Scarlet Express, and I'm here in the Keystone State, Pennsylvania, reporting for Weed Talk News. Pennsylvania lawmakers will soon consider a proposal to create temporary electronic cannabis cards. State Representative Guzman says any delays in issuing a new card to patients may cause a lapse in their treatment and setbacks to their access to medical cannabis. The bill would require the Department of Health to develop and implement temporary electronic medical cannabis identification cards for renewals. The cards would be made immediately available in the patient portal after the department approves certification and receives the renewal fee. Next up, a Pennsylvania appeals court ruled Friday that the state's medical marijuana law does not prohibit insurers from reimbursing injured workers for medical marijuana in cases where the drug is used to treat accepted work injuries. The PA Commonwealth Court agreed that workers' comp carriers are required to reimburse injured workers who use medical marijuana to treat severe and often lifelong injuries. This is a game changer for those injured workers who have worked hard to get off dangerous and expensive opioids and are forced to pay the cost of medical marijuana treatment out of their fixed incomes. Firestone Tire and Rubber argued it would violate federal law if forced to reimburse for medical marijuana, which is illegal federally, but the court ruled the reimbursement is not a federal crime because insurers are not prescribing the drugs themselves. Well, that's a wrap from Pennsylvania. I'm Maya Krysztofowicz from Scarlet Express, and I'll be back next week to talk about what's hot and what's not in Pennsylvania. From Weed Talk News, have a fabulous week.
When it comes to the stock market, our expert is Doug Miller from High on Wall Street. Here's this week's Cannabis Stock Report with Doug.
Hello, everyone. I'm Doug Miller from High on Wall Street with this week's Cannabis Stock Report for Weed Talk News. Curaleaf, they did it again. Well, they are closing an entire cultivation site in New Jersey, and it's a large operation. And if you listen to the Green Rush Live often, you will hear me mention this particular facility. I know the facility very well, and I've said they've been caught selling moldy product multiple times, and their product just is not good coming out of there. I'm sorry, it's not. If it was good, I would say it was, but it's not worth buying. So I understand why they're closing, and I can see them closing the doors in that New Jersey location and other ones as well pretty soon. But let's go ahead and look at the stock chart because it closed at 305 today. It's going in the basement and it's just dipping deeper. It's an OTC stock at this point. You're talking about a company that was pumped so much money. I mean, so much investor money, and they just burned through the cash like it was nothing. The companies run terribly. They don't know what they're doing in the cannabis industry, and it shows because they're going to be out of the business real soon. So, Curaleaf, you should get your stuff together. You had to close down in the top 3 markets, Colorado, Oregon, and California. I mean, come on. Now you're closing this huge facility, and you're going to be closing your doors at many others. So it's dipping down. I'm not touching it. That's this week's Cannabis Stock Report. Reporting for Weed Talk News, I'm Doug Miller.
Remember a few weeks ago when Twitter made this big announcement that they would be allowing for cannabis companies to advertise? Well, it only took 3 hours for one company from Las Vegas to post an ad for their cannabis accessories before Twitter took them down. The company is Hemper, and their marketing director is not deterred. He will continue to try to get his messaging out about his paraphernalia. Now, you know the saying, politics makes strange bedfellows? Well, now a major alcohol industry association is calling for the federal legalization of cannabis. That's right. The Wine and Spirits Association points out the disparity between federal law and state laws, and that's the reason why they're on board. They also said that their industry has set a great example for cannabis, serving as a role model. So for all of you who have cut out alcohol consumption and replaced your buzz with cannabis, let's show some equal time for wine and spirits. That's this week's Weed Talk News. I'm the founder of Pro Cannabis Media, Jimmy Young. Elena Pinto will be back next week. But remember, it's a whole new world of weed out there. Use it responsibly. It's a whole new world of weed out there, isn't it? Everyone is learning new ways to titrate, ingest, consume, imbibe, and engage with this plant medicine we call cannabis. Hi, I'm Jimmy Young, the founder of Pro Cannabis Media and the host of In the Weeds, and once in a while, the really live business cannabis talk show we call Green Rush on Friday afternoons from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern. Now, let me tell you my cannabis story. You know, I've had 4 major surgeries in the past 23 years and suffer from osteoarthritis with a variety of metal parts in my body and one on deck. Now, thanks to those chronic pain issues, I've been a medical patient in Massachusetts for almost 10 years now. I remember my first trip to a dispensary just outside of Boston, and I told the bud tender I didn't want to smoke it anymore. So I tried edibles, then tinctures, then vaping, and now if I'm going to smoke, I only use the Weejits filtration system. What? The Weejits.com, Weejits, that's weed, W-E-E-D, G-E-T-S.com, is where you'll find the planet's coolest product that cools the smoke from everyone's favorite flower. Now, the guy that started this was a pretty good medical device manufacturer, and he created this maze pipe that cools the smoking process from 1300 degrees Fahrenheit upon inflammation down to just 90 degrees when it reaches your mouth. That's right, 1300 down to 90. That's why this maze pipe is amazing. So here's how it works. You start with that glass bowl, you flame on, and then you inhale nice and smooth so the smoke goes through 3 different filtration and cooling systems. Now, if pre-rolls is your thing, you can use the Weegits filter that a pre-roll fits into perfectly. That's right, or even a chillum. The more filters, the smoother the draw. Best of all is the price. You can get all this, or one or the other, for just a few bucks. It'll cool your smoke and you'll give your lungs a break. Now, add in the code of PCMTV and you get 15% off. So just go to Weegits.com and check out the best way to enjoy a cooler smoke with less coughing and hacking and more peace of mind. All that resin and tar is collected in the polyurethane filters that are easy to clean with soap, water, and a few Q-tips. Your lungs will thank you, and so will I.
As a broker, we have access to many cannabis carriers. So I will go in with 2 or 3 quotes for people. The quotes might be $20,000 for one, $22,000 for another, $17,500 for another. Pretty close among the 3. What I tell people is it's not the pricing, it's what's included and not included, meaning exclusions. An exclusion in layman's terms is just something that's not included. It's not on the menu. So it's just not included. But if you don't know that, if no one shows you that on page 71 of a 150-page policy, you're not going to know. No one knows. I never met one person that says they read an insurance policy. If you do, I got some property in Florida for you.
Weed Talk and In the Weeds are 2 productions of Pro Cannabis Media supported by Revolutionary Clinics, one of the top medical cannabis dispensaries in the Massachusetts area, now with 3 locations in Greater Boston, 2 in Cambridge and 1 on Broadway in Somerville. Rev Clinics has a patient-first mission. They will customize your needs as a medical patient with the proper titration and combination of strains, flavors, and products. Rev Clinics, where the patient comes first.
So the reality of the matter is, big banks and small banks are going to be different in a lot of ways. And they're both going to have their advantages and disadvantages. For a business like cannabis, you really have to have an integral knowledge of that business and a real granular knowledge of that business and the players involved in it. And that's why if you look at the banks that are successful to play in this space in Massachusetts, they are smaller banks that are very heavy, intensified personal touch, human communication, where you don't get a lot of that with the bigger banks.